Hello and welcome everybody to our SPT Sutra Studies class. My name is Venerable Tarpa. Before we begin, let's take a moment, like usual, to appreciate our handsome community gathered here today. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing this present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds, transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, and to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. Again, welcome to our SPT Sutra Studies class. We are currently examining the Dhammachakkapavatana Sutra, that's a mouthful, or the Setting in Motion of the Wheel of Dharma Sutra, or simply a Wheel Turning Sutra. So this sutra is considered to be a record of the first sermon given by the Buddha at the legendary deer park in Sarnath, India, outside of the city of Varanasi. This legendary discourse was taught to the Buddha's first 5 disciples. And you might have noticed when I said that, I talked about this is considered to be a record of the first sermon given by the Buddha. So traditional Buddhists all assert this as the first teaching of the Buddha, but modern scholars are now believing that there's some uncertainty of that quite possibly this was recorded or taught at a later time when the Buddhist teachings were more formulated, and then kind of later asserted to go back to the beginning, because of course all of the Buddhist teachings are supposed to emanate from this first teaching, because the Four Noble Truths in one way or another are supposed to include all of the Buddhist teachings. So there's a little bit of controversy of whether that's true or not. We'll be studying 3 versions or translations of the Wheel Turning Sutra to allow us to contrast and compare the material from different viewpoints. And of course, the ability to contrast and compare is where wisdom arises from. Our main text is by Bhikkhu Bodhi from the Theravada tradition. Another is by Choki Nyima Rinpoche from the Tibetan tradition. And the third is by Thich Nhat Hanh from the Zen tradition. All of these texts are free to download and share. You can find them all on our website at sptonline.org. So with that said, let's get to the text. And what we're going to do is this sutra is a little different than the Dhammapada. So I was trying to figure out exactly how we teach it. And so though this sutra is quite short, it's about a page and a half long, the material in it is quite dense. And I'm always kind of surprised that there wasn't more detail given in this sutra. They just kind of go over some of these very rich and important and complicated aspects quite quickly. And so what I wanted to do is take it slowly and be able to talk about some of these things and to have some dialogue. I really want everybody's input into what they think. So I think what I'll do is, I'm going to start with this one, which is Bhikkhu Bodhi's. Our first exploration of this sutra, I think is just going to be the first paragraph, and it pertains to the Buddha's middle way, which is a big topic. So I think what I'll do is, how about if I just read through each version, and then I'll go back and we'll talk about it. I think I'm favoring Bhikkhu Bodhi's version of it. It seems quite nice. Thich Nhat Hanh's version is probably one of the easiest, and he has a wonderful presentation, but he really does give his own presentation. Bhikkhu Bodhi's is much more accurate to the texts themselves. And one last thing is the Tibetan version by Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche. He doesn't have the first paragraph. His text starts with the Four Noble Truths. So in the Tibetan tradition, the first paragraph wasn't there. And it's taken from the Tibetan canon, the Kangyur. And so this first paragraph was probably found in another sutra somewhere else within the Kangyur. So let's begin with this. Thus I have heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the deer park at Isputana. I also have to apologize. I'm a Sanskrit student, and I do not pronounce Pali words very well. I am not a Pali scholar, and my tradition is a commentary tradition, so I'm actually not a sutra scholar as well, like some of the Theravada. They spent all of their education studying sutras, which Tibetans don't. There, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus of the group of five. Thus, bhikkhu is a word for monk, and the group of five means the first five monks. And this is the words of the Buddha: bhikkhus, these two extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. Gone forth into homelessness is a way of saying to become a monastic, or in our case, a serious practitioner. What two? The pursuit of sensual happiness and sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Let's talk about that sentence. So the pursuit of sensual happiness, it's not sexual happiness, it's sexual pleasure, it's sensual. And I think we can assume sexuality is within that. But this is also, the love of food, things like that. But I remember reading when I visited Bodh Gaya, when I visited Varanasi, in the along the road pathways that go through all the artifacts and the ruins, they have plaques that write about these sutras on them, and they're quite nice. And I remember reading this on a plaque, and I thought it was very moving to me when they talked about sensual happiness and sensual pleasure being low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, and unbeneficial. On the plaque, I think the translation was a little bit different. But what I noticed was, it was the Buddha telling us that these sensual pleasures and sensual happiness, as much as we might enjoy them, they're so beneath us as human beings. It became so clear to me that what the Buddha was saying was, you don't know it, but human beings are worth so much more than that. For you amazing human beings, these things are so much lower than you are. They're vulgar, the way of worldlings, just worldlings, regular people in the world, ignoble, not noble, unbeneficial. And that made a real impact on me. I remember when I first read that. I think that helps me to kind of set those things aside, that the Buddha thought so much more of us than we think of ourselves. And then this idea of the pursuit of self-mortification. So the self-mortification is damaging the body or causing the body to suffer, believing that somehow that leads to awakening or a religious experience. Of course, all the religions have this. It also includes a strong, overly strong asceticism, and it says here, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. When before the Buddha's enlightenment, there's stories of his intense practice, and it seems clear that at some point the Buddha was taking on practices from one of the religions of the day, the Jain religion. So in the Buddha's day, there's two religions. They're the Brahmin religion, which is the precursor to Hinduism. It's not Hinduism, but it's the grandfather of it. And then you have Jainism. And Jainism believed in this self-mortification, and they would do things like starve the body, where they would only eat 6 grains of rice and 2 juniper berries a day, things like that. They would burn the flesh. They would do all kinds of strange positions, and they believed that by punishing the body, it could purify the body. And so there are stories of the Buddha doing these practices. And at one point, the Buddha claims that he went to scratch his stomach and he took hold of his spine. This is how thin the Buddha was. It's another reason why those fat Buddha statues are so funny, because the Buddha clearly was quite the opposite. In the story when the Buddha finally stops these practices, and is when he comes out of the cave, he goes down to the river. You probably know the story. He decides to bathe, which he's not supposed to do. He realizes that these extreme mortification practices didn't lead to enlightenment. All they did was make his body suffer and his mind weaker. And so he gave up on them. He took a bath in the river. He comes out, a young girl gives him a bowl of rice milk, and he takes it, and the other people that he's meditating with, they all think the Buddha has given up on the practice, and they all reject him. So this is some of the self-mortifications that go on. In fact, in Jainism, it's very common for practitioners to go into retreat and starve themselves to death. And that's not considered a bad way to die. So the Jains are intense practitioners. In modern day India, as Shiva knows, if you're in South India, where Shiva and me were studying, the Jains, there's one form of Jain that don't wear clothes, and they have a broom that they use to sweep insects out of the way. They have a cloth that goes over their mouth. They sleep with no blanket, no pillow, nothing. They just sleep on the bare floor. And so they're really intense ascetics. But again, the Buddha found that this was painful, ignoble, and unbeneficial. So let's get back to the text here. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata is a phrase that the Buddha would often use when talking about himself. People would say Tathagata for the Buddha, and the Buddha would say it for himself. And there's a lot of criticisms or controversy of there's a lot of debate of exactly what the term Tathagata means. But I think most people would agree that it means an enlightened being. So when we say the Tathagata in the sutras, it's usually related to the Buddha himself. So without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment and nibbana, or nirvana in Sanskrit. So here we first hear about the Buddha's middle way. And I might as well finish it. And in the next paragraph, and what bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, etc., that leads to nirvana. It's the four noble eightfold path. It's the noble eightfold path, and which is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness, right concentration. We're gonna talk about the Eightfold Path in detail in next week's class. So coming back to this, so between these two extremes is his middle way path. By not getting into either one of those extremes, the Buddha finds the middle way path, and it leads to awakening. And aren't some of the wording is just beautiful? Is the terminology, gives rise to vision. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I can explain what they mean here by vision. It seems maybe vision is right view, which gives rise to knowledge, which gives rise to peace, and what gives rise to direct knowledge. Now, the difference between the two is one is a conceptual knowledge, basic knowledge through study, like we're doing right now. The other is direct knowledge, which is experiential. This is in life, on or off the cushion, when you have an experience of the teachings that is more than just something you've read off a page, that you really get it. It's that aha moment when you go, that's what they mean. This is direct knowledge, and which is enlightenment and nibbana itself, right? Okay. And I think what I'll do is just read from Thich Nhat Hanh. So in Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche's, we don't have that first paragraph. In Thich Nhat Hanh's we do. And Thich Nhat Hanh's is such a lovely presentation because it's so different. It's spoken in many ways more in his own voice. And I think it's just absolutely lovely. So this is what I have heard. At one time, the world-honored one was staying near Varanasi in Isipatana in the deer park. Isipatana, by the way, is rain's retreat. Rain's retreat is the rain season in India. This is a time during rain season, all monastics, instead of wandering around in the rain, they gather somewhere and they do a retreat for the whole rain's retreat, usually 3 months. And they just practice in one place. At that time, the world-honored one addresses the group of 5 monks, saying, "Bhikkhus, there are 2 extremes that a monk should avoid." What are the 2? And I love the wording of this. The first is the devotion to sensual desire and the pleasure resulting from sensual desire. Such devotion is base, pedestrian, worldly, ignoble, unbeneficial. The second is devotion to harsh austerity. Such devotion is painful, ignoble, and unbeneficial. By not following either of these extremes, the Tathagata has realized the middle way. Somebody dropped something in the kitchen. That gives rise to seeing and understanding. Oh, so in our first text, they use the word vision. Here, they're using the word seeing and understanding. Now, to me, that would pertain to just simply right view, developing the right perspective. And of course, perspective is the way we see the world, right? It's our vision of the world. This seeing and understanding are the base of peace, knowledge, full awakening, and nirvana. What is the middle way, bhikkhus, that the Tathagata has realized that gives rise to seeing and understanding? when that seeing and understanding are at the basis of peace, knowledge, full awakening, and nirvana, it is the Noble Eightfold Path consisting of right view. We've read through those already. Bhikkhus, the Tathagata has realized that gives rise to seeing and understanding, when that seeing and understanding are at the base of peace, hope, full awakening, and nirvana. So they're saying right view is what leads to those things. So one thing I wanted to back up a little bit on, and isn't that beautiful, huh? I think Thich Nhat Hanh's language is just lovely. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the opening phrase of sutras is quite important. The phrase, like in this case, thus I have heard at one time, there's a couple different opening lines they use. That's very common. Or simply, thus I have heard, or others are common opening lines found in the Buddhist sutras, particularly in the Pali Canon. These phrases serve to indicate the authority and reliability of the sutra, and that the speaker is recounting that this was something they'd heard directly from the Buddha. So at the beginning of each sutra, they have this. This opening line goes on to establish also the place of the teaching, the season in which they're shared, and a description of the audience in attendance. And so as you can see here, we have all of those. Thus we have heard at one time. So somebody's telling us these are the words of the Buddha that they heard themselves. And they talk about who it was, staying near Varanasi, right? That's the place. Isapatana is the rains retreat. That's the time of year in the deer park. And maybe all of you know the idea of the deer park. In Varanasi, the Buddha is said to have taught in this beautiful deer park, which you can go to today and see all the ruins, and it's quite beautiful. And then the audience is here. In this sutra, it's a group of 5 monks. These are the Buddha's first 5 disciples. So that's important to know. And that'll be the beginning of each one of the sutras that we study. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? Should I take a second for questions or comments? What do you guys think? I can't see everyone on the screen. Pema, if anybody's has their hand up, let me know.
I felt that this was a beautiful way to present the middle way and the Eightfold Path. I have studied this before, so I have been some understanding of it. So I thought it was a beautiful way that they did it.
You know, it's one of the only places I've ever seen that they actually call the Eightfold Path the middle way. And in my studies of the Eightfold Path throughout all these years, people never talk about it like that. People always talk about it as just the last of the Four Noble Truths. People never say, well, never define it. And even my research today, when I always try to brush up on these things. When I was researching the middle way, not once did any of the texts I went over talk about the Eightfold Path being the middle way.
Well, I guess I look at it as when he describes the extremes of mortification and where he lived in luxury. In looking at the text, that's where I find that he's saying, okay, I tried this mortification and I tried the extreme, and what I've discovered is that there is a middle way, a path to nirvana.
Yeah. But then to go on and say that, and that middle way is the Eightfold Path. That's kind of unusual. I think it's something that we should remember and practice.
Yeah, that's how I actually learned it. So
yeah, lovely. That's lovely. Sometimes going back to the sutras, you forget things that you hadn't read for so long. One of the things that struck me the most in Thich Nhat Hanh's version is that word devotion. So we often say that in life, the things in life, the phenomena in life aren't the problem. It's our relation to those things, right? This is something we're always coming back to. And then we're talking about that sensual desires and sensual pleasures aren't a problem. It's our relationship to those. We can have a virtuous relationship with these things, or we can have non-virtuous relationship with these things. And so sometimes we'll talk about it's our attachment to sensual desire and sensual pleasures that's the problem. And here, I like that Thich Nhat Hanh says it's our devotion to them. I thought that was just spectacular. That paints such a picture, doesn't it?
Tarpa,
yeah.
can you hear me? Yeah,
I can.
I put something in the chat.
Pamela, could you read it to me?
Sure. David said that use of devotion to sensual pleasure is the first time I have been able to see what the middle path between pleasure and I don't know what that word is. Authority, I guess, is
Austerity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this really comes back to what I'm always talking about with all of us, that these things aren't necessarily the problem. It's our relationship to those. And when you're devoted to those, when every aspect of your life is devoted to these qualities. And they talk about, being devoted to sensual desires. Now, we can all relate to that because in one way or another, we're all, devoted to Ben & Jerry's ice cream. We're devoted to whatever, there's always something we all do. But the devotion to austerity is a strange concept. And the Buddha talked about, like the Jains, just like way too into this and thinking that somehow they're going to benefit. Modern science talks about that. The way this self-mortification works is it's a chemical reaction in the brain that, you punish the body and it releases endorphins and it gives you an experience that some might think is spiritual. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's an interesting thing I read. I like some of the language that this devotion is base. Isn't that such a great word, right? The base level of humanity, just, no elevation at any kind, no transcendence, just base level human being, right? Animal level human being, pedestrian, I think kind of the same kind of word. I love the language here. And again, they talk about devotion to harsh austerity. Some austerity is there. In Buddhism, as a monk, there's some austerity for me. I do practice certain things that are a little bit more difficult than regular practitioners, whether for monks that only, they stop eating at noon and they don't eat the rest of the day. That's a bit tough, or celibacy or whatever it may be, but it's reasonable. Yeah. And so, in one of our prayers, we talk about the middle way being that the Buddha didn't condone self-punishment. Instead, he recommended his middle way path, right? The comfort of his middle way. I think I say it in the prayer. The Buddha recommends the comfort of his middle way. And I believe that that's true. I think the Buddha is finding the comfortable place between these two extremes. And if you'd like to, by the way, I think the class will be short, so you only have to keep your eyes open for a little bit more, Pamela. That's okay. She works hard. So there's two stories about the Buddha's middle way path, the path of moderation and balance. That's usually how it's seen, right? The first story is that the Buddha comes about this idea is by, as Yoli was asserting, that he starts off life as a prince, And as the stories go, that he has everything he could want. He's living a very rich life, very indulgent life. And then he goes to the opposite. He leaves the palace and he becomes an ascetic. And I've already mentioned some of the practices that he does, right? He pretty much just turns into a ball of dirt sitting there meditating, almost starving himself to death. And from that realization, he finds that neither one works. This is his first insight into the middle way between indulgence and denial. That's another way to think about the middle way. Indulging in these pleasures and denial of pleasures, denial of the body, right? So that's the first reckoning of this idea. There's another story that talks about the Buddha seeing a musician playing a stringed instrument. And he sees the musician tuning the strings. And he notices that if the strings are too tight, they'll break. But if they're too loose, they won't play. And he saw this as an analogy to the practitioner. That, and you can think about this as kind of our mental style, that when you're in meditation, when you're practicing, yes, we need some attention there. We need some tautness there, like a string. We need to have a certain level of effort or discipline or mental concentration in order to perform as a good practitioner, to be able to make the practices work. On the other hand, if we get too tight, it doesn't work. You know, the string breaks. Maybe you run away from the monastery and become a plumber. And then on the other way, if we're too laxed, the practitioner just can't sing, right? His practice doesn't work. So that's another great analogy. It's finding that beautiful sweet spot in the middle where neither ends are beneficial. Too tight or too loose are not beneficial. It's finding that beautiful spot in the middle. And that's what each one of us has to find for ourselves. We never want to overdo it. That's why we talk about soft practice. That's why we talk about doing the best we can, right? This is the idea of it. This is why we talk about joyful efforts, because there has to be this joy that's there. That stops us from being too tight. And then there's kind of four aspects to the idea of the middle way, pertaining to practice, philosophy, and view. The middle way pertaining to practice is a middle way between extremes of overindulgence and extreme asceticism, which we've talked about, meaning devotion to sense desires and pleasures, and devotion to pursuit of self-mortification. And in particularly, or let's say that, number two is a middle way of being, of abiding, of being, to abide in equanimity, neither anxious nor lax, not favoring nor opposing. This is to be and to become that camera lens that just is witness to the world, right? Of course, we do this in meditation, but when practices of stillness, we can learn to be like this all the time and not react to the world. So those are the two of practice. The middle way pertaining to philosophy and view are a middle way philosophy as a path of moderation between extreme views, of all views, especially that extreme views of nihilism and absolutism. In Buddhism, they talk about these are the two failures in Buddhism, especially when we're talking about learning emptiness. Nihilism is to fall into a mental state that nothing matters, that nothing really is worthwhile, nothing really exists, so nothing is worthwhile. Since things don't really exist, then things like goodness, virtue, compassion, they also don't exist. And this is a dangerous state that some practitioners can fall into. The other one is the opposite. They call it absolutism, but it's a kind of a strange word to get your mind around. But it kind of means that it's the opposite of this. In a lot of ways, like religions that believe in heaven, they believe in you have a soul that goes on, that you yourself are going to exist forever in heaven and drink milk and have fun, right? Those are the two extremes that the Buddhas are trying to avoid. Number 4 is a middle way between the two prominent religions of the Buddha's day, the highly materialistic Brahmanism and the excessively ascetic Jainism. Again, Brahmanism is the precursor to modern day Hinduism, and Jainism is still alive and well in India. It's a small sect, but they still are practicing. It's a lovely faith. So the Buddhism itself is considered the middle way between Brahmanism and Jainism. It sees those two as both being extremes. And Richard Gumbridge makes that point. I think it's quite beautiful. But with that said, there are qualities that Buddhists are not extremes about. Can anybody tell me what those things are? What do you think? I'm going to shut this off so I can see all of you. What do you think? Do you think in all cases we should follow the middle way? Is the middle way an absolute? Oh, I got you thinking.
David said compassion.
Ah, who said that?
David.
David's pretty smart. Yeah, we're extremists in compassion, aren't we?
Enjoyment in others, whatever that they've done really
Yeah, yeah. So in some ways, Buddhists can be extremists, but in certain things. Anything else?
Valuing life.
Say again?
Valuing life. And
Valuing, and nonviolence, right? Yeah. Yeah. Those are good ones. Anybody else? I know the answer. I can't go. Go ahead, Jen.
Just our love for others.
Oh, yeah. A love for others. Yeah. Anybody else want to turn? How about truth? Yeah. Buddhists are definitely extremists in truth, right? How about virtue?
although I suppose, aren't we allowed white lies as long as it protects?
Not really. How about somebody mentioned compassion. How about honesty? Oh, Brian was just Sangpo was just mentioning that honesty. No, we're kind of extremists in honesty. Or at least monks, we're not even supposed to tell white lies, which I never do, which is a white lie.
What do you think about devotion?
Oh, well, we're cautious about devotion. Yeah, we have I think we have a middle way on devotion between blind devotion and truth and the truthful devotion. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. And nonviolence, we kind of mentioned that, right? So we are kind of extremists in some things. But then I was thinking, well, maybe even some of those qualities can be taken too far. Is it possible to take compassion too far? This is a debate I've had with myself for a long time. How about goodness? Here's a good one. Can we take goodness too far?
Well, you talk about idiot compassion, so I guess
yeah, yeah. Or how about if you take goodness too far, does it turn into these crazy ideology things, these wacko religious people who really think they're doing good, but the whole thing's turned inside out because they've become so rigid in their idea of good. And so, you know, sometimes I think that maybe we are still middle way on these qualities.
But isn't that the point of the middle way, that you aren't rigid on these things? There is a bit more fluidity there. There is a little bit more.
Yeah.
You've almost got a buffer, you know.
Yeah.
Jainism doesn't have a buffer, just non-existent, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe even these qualities that we mentioned, still you got to be careful not to take them. Even those qualities, maybe extreme truth is not, you know, whatever that means. Extreme virtue, can that be taken too far? I don't think there's an answer to it. I think there are ways. I think there's ways that we can turn those qualities inside out and get some strange views. But I don't know if that means that we're taking them too far. I think that's just taking them in the wrong direction. Jennifer?
I think a lot of them, it has to do with our intent, our goodness, our compassion. What is our intent for it? Is it to really help others, or is it to uplift ourselves and make ourselves look good? So I think our intent plays a big part on whether or not we've taken things to an extreme.
But the road, what is that saying? The road to something is paved by good intentions.
Mm.
So, but maybe it's our wisdom, not our intention. Maybe it's our wisdom to apply it. Pasan?
I think that David has a lot of good questions in the chat.
Oh,
Like, what are we Buddhists extreme about? If compassion is combined with wisdom, it cannot be taken too far.
well said. Yeah, I think that's the thing that saves all the qualities, right? It's wisdom, right? And wisdom it pertains to our relationship to the qualities, right? What's our relationship with compassion? Yeah. It could be idiot compassion, or it can be virtuous compassion. Yeah. So anyways, very fascinating stuff. So the middle way school, or the middle way philosophy, is quite amazing. Okay, Nima, bye-bye. Good to see you. Thank you for participating. And so on that note, does anybody want to share anything else about the text? I thought Thich Nhat Hanh's text was just lovely. What do you guys think? Just beautiful, huh? You liked it? Okay. And so next week we're going to talk about the Eightfold Path, I think. That'll probably be enough for a class, right? Because after that we get into the Four Noble Truths. And what I'd like to do is take our time, do some shorter classes, because a lot of our classes get too long, and participate in them. So let's talk about that for next week. We'll do the Eightfold Path, and you can all study up on it. That's a great teaching right there. And if there's no more comments, I'm going to just say, in conclusion, remember that the sutra teachings are meant as practice instructions. So in order to get the greatest benefit, we need to engage fully with them, utilizing the three great objectives of study, contemplation, and practice. Your work this week is discover how these teachings apply to your daily life, transforming them from words on a page into living Dharma. Next week, we'll be moving on to our next topic, which is the Eightfold Path. And just in hindsight, I remember one thing I wanted to talk about, but I didn't, and that was the 8 worldly dharmas. We've shared that before with everybody. What I'm going to do is post the meme for it in our social media, but there are 4 sets of extremes that we stay away from, that we want to be in the middle of. And it's a thing that really exemplifies the middle way path. So I'll just post it on social media for everybody. But that's a way to really help you practice the middle way path this week, right? I want to see everybody practicing the middle way path, to look at these extremes and try to notice them in your own life. All right, with that said, why don't we end today's sutra class with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I had a lot of fun. I hope it was informative and fairly interesting.
Thank you, Tarpa.
Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Tarpa. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.